What's the appeal of Power? Wait, I somehow hit 100 subscribers. Thanks for putting up with me. The past few years have been really interesting for Power Rangers. For a long while, Disney were the ones working on the show, but Saban brought back the rights and started airing it on Nickelodeon. This resulted in quite a few changes to each new series, with the inconsistent quality being one of them. I liked Samurai despite it being a very rushed copy-paste of Shinkenger. Megaforce is the definition of a series that has no clue what it's trying to do, meaning it ends up failing on almost every count. Dino Charge had a really solid start, only to we'll talk about Dino Charge's end another time. So it's understandable that most fans would predict Ninja Steel's downfall from the very beginning, but honestly, I think that it's a very clever series that captures some of my favourite elements from RPM, whilst having a similar tone to Mighty Morphin. In my opinion, the presentation and costume designs in these kinds of shows are extremely important. It may sound pretty shallow, but I'd say it's the equivalent of an anime having really pretty animation. The reason I mention this is because Ninja Steel might be my favourite so far in terms of presentation. The costumes themselves are really cool looking. I've always been a fan of the visors that take up a large portion of the helmet, with Lightspeed Rescue being my favourite costume as a kid. The visors are in the shape of each Ranger's ninja star. I also really like the bandana over the chest as well as the black arms. These suits really fit the ninja theme of the series whilst looking very slick and stylish. Speaking of slick, the Rangers get an armoured form and a Megazord. This form looks so good it's honestly unreal. A lot of the time armoured forms end up looking too bulky, since to me the appeal of Power Rangers costumes is that they're skin tight and simple. Ninja Master Mode, however, looks like a natural extension of the standard form. The Zords are all based off of each Ranger's closest possessions, with the Megazord being a Gurren Lagann style robot piloting a bigger robot. What makes this even better is that the Blue Ranger Zord can switch places with Red and also pilot the Megazord. The cockpit changes depending on what power-up they're using. The Rangers have a different morpher compared to this series' Super Sentai counterpart. In Japan, their sword was the morpher, but here it's a big shuriken weapon that works kind of like a Swiss Army knife without having lots of different functions, like being a claw, knife, or beautiful looking bow. It could be because I'm a fan of bows, or it could be because I like the bigger, chunkier morphers we've been getting recently, but I really like this morpher a lot, and it fits its role of being the morpher better than the sword did. Also, the blaster in this series is a frog, the correct kind of campy. Whilst I doubt any Power Rangers series will ever have a better balance in tone than RPM, Ninja Steel does a good job of keeping the more corny elements the franchise is known for, while still being somewhat easy to take seriously. And it does so by doing my favourite thing in the world. I adore the way the show just runs with it and gives these tropes new usefulness and meaning. Okay, so hear me out for a sec, because this next part is the coolest idea for a Power Rangers plot I've ever heard. The main villain Galvanax is the owner and current champion of an intergalactic game show, and the Monster of the Week villains are all the contestants. As you can guess, one of the ways of winning this game show is to defeat the Power Rangers. Even better, the villains aren't even really villains per se. Galvanax just wants the ninja stars that the Rangers own and thinks that they're rightfully his. The only reason they're fighting the Rangers is because they won't give up the ninja stars they stole. So yeah, the actual Rangers could be considered the villains depending on what angle you look at this from, and why the hell is this kid show so nuanced and morally grey? Okay, it's not entirely morally grey since we get shown how Galvanax obtained the ninja stars in the first place, but it's an interesting step in the right direction, and he's already a better villain than most previous main villains. The reason the Monster of the Weeks are taking part in the game show is for the same reason that most people enter one. They just want fame and fortune, not a particularly evil motivation, and they get some humanization and some more comedic moments.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my friends, my family, my dog, my therapist's dog.
Because this is a game show, the villains need to put on a show that's entertaining. They explain their plans to the audience watching the show, and if they aren't entertaining enough, the audience will boo them and they won't earn the right to fight the Megazord. Why even send out a Monster of the Week though? Why not just have Galvanax, who's the champion of the game show and the main villain of the series, go and defeat the Rangers instead? Well, he's a celebrity that has a lot of fame. But he's also out of practice and can't afford to take any hits at all during the fight. If he wants to fight, he has to live up to those expectations and win completely one-sided.
Galvanax, a word. There's 5 Rangers now. You're out of practice. If they knock you down once, you'll look weak. Your fans despise weakness.
So he's not going to risk it. He's a smart character that is using the other villains as a distraction until he's completely buffed up again, and he knows for certain that he can completely decimate the Rangers. Now that we've talked about the villain side of things, what about the Rangers? Brody was taken by Galvanax as a child and has grown up working as a janitor for the Galaxy Warriors game show. Galvanax sees this as a good thing since he's given him a place to live, work and grow up whilst working on such a big and influential game show. But Brody manages to escape since he wants to be reunited with his family on Earth. He takes the Ninja Nexus prism with him, which is why I said the Rangers could potentially be seen as morally grey rather than outright heroes. The Ninja Nexus prism contained the 6 ninja stars, and if you can pull out one of the 6 ninja stars from inside of it, you are given the ability to transform into a Ranger. The Nexus prism is shown as somewhat sentient. It never talks or anything, but it does poke the Rangers in the general direction it wants them to go a lot, and this means that any coincidences can be explained as something the Nexus prism made happen so the Rangers can have an easier time. I like Brody as a Red Ranger. He's definitely the opposite of a Mary Sue in a lot of regards. That makes him a lot more interesting and less predictable than a lot of previous leaders. He was taught how to fight by his father as a child, but after that he spent a significant amount of years growing up as a janitor without any kind of school. This makes him really airheaded, and a lot of the time he acts like he hasn't grown up yet because he was never given the chance to, but at the same time he's a very powerful and talented fighter, not only because of him being taught by his father, but also because he grew up interacting with Galaxy Warriors and its contestants. The other Rangers fit the kind of role you'd expect them to, but we're only 8 episodes through so far, and they've all had at least one episode each to flesh them out a bit and make them feel less two-dimensional, like how Preston wants to become a magician because he looked up to his father who was also one. Mick is honestly one of the better characters in this season. He was a janitor along with Brody and becomes this series' mentor character once the team is formed. He's pretty airheaded and comical just like Brody, but he's very useful. He lucks his way into becoming a teacher at the school the Rangers go to, and converts the school's workshop into a command center for them. He then uses the tools in said workshop to physically make the power-ups for the Rangers with the help of Redbot. These power-ups don't actually do anything until they're thrown into the Nexus Prism, but the fact that Mick has to physically make these power-ups explains not only why the Rangers don't just start off with every power-up, but also why it takes them so long to get them and why they're spread out the way they are. It's the little details like these that really make Ninja Steel work so well. As I mentioned earlier, this series also tries to be lighthearted and harken back to Mighty Morphin. The most noticeable aspect of this are Victor and Monty, a duo of characters that play out in a similar way to Bulk and Skull. The most prominent complaints I've heard about Ninja Steel have always had something to do with these two characters and them being too silly. This is Power Rangers though. Don't get me wrong, I love the more serious elements of the franchise, but it's not the smartest idea to complain about Power Rangers getting silly on occasion. It's a core part of the franchise and it's actually handled very well here too. The actors playing Victor and Monty have very good chemistry and their interactions always work.
Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
Does your hair look spectacular today?
No. Well, yes, but not that. Let me show you.
Plus, just like the villains of this series, Victor and Monty aren't outright bullies. They point out that Brody was cheating on a test, they tried to stop one of the villains, and they're skeptical of Preston's magic. If anything, they're the least morally grey of any of the characters, yet the Rangers always treat them like they're selfish. Whilst the jokes are kinda dumb, they are well executed and have made me laugh a few times. They could have so easily gotten away with straight up copying Bulk and Skull, but they do something different that I think works. Don't get me wrong, I am very skeptical that Ninja Steel will end up sticking the landing in future episodes, but so far I am very happy with the attention to detail, as well as it just being a good looking show with great fighting and effects. There is a lot to look forward to in future, with this being the 25th anniversary series that'll have some crossovers with past Rangers later on. I do hope this video managed to help the more harsh Rangers fans see that there are redeeming values, even if it doesn't completely convince anyone. And there's a lot that I didn't mention, like how the first episode doesn't use any Super Sentai footage at all, and how in the first episode the Nexus Prism disappears, comes back again in the second episode and the Gold Ninja Star is missing, which is a really good way of foreshadowing the Gold Ranger. But yeah, I'm enjoying Ninja Steel so far and I'm looking forward to when it returns in August.